Welcome to the Future Proof podcast. We're here talking about game-changing approach to B2B marketing. I'm here with the founder of Evolve Media, Dan, and I'm going to let him kind of talk about his business and give us a little synopsis of what they're about.
Well, Alex, really, thank you very much for inviting me onto the podcast because it's always great to talk nerdy tech with somebody who can, have the same sort of experience and understand the weird language that we all speak. I'm the founder of Evolve Media. We are a B2B agency for tech marketing. Over the years, we've done all sorts of different things. We started, our first client engagement was in 2003. And since then, we've moved from custom publishing to content marketing to doing thought leadership and white papers and ebooks and all the things that people need. Most often we work for corporate communications or product marketing, sometimes for demand gen. And what we do is we provide them ammunition to execute programs. The reason we have a business is that it's really hard for people to find writers and analysts who can actually understand what their brain trust is learning and then translate that into compelling purpose-built content for a variety of different purposes in marketing. And because of my background as a CTO and also my background as a journalist, where I worked actually in newsrooms, I'm able to do that. And I've built a team approach to doing it so we can do it at scale. So it's an enduring, need because the world just gets more and more complex. And really, what do companies have to offer? They have to offer teaching people how to solve problems. And then, of course, usually their product is a help. But it's really most startups, most tech companies are really research organizations. And, the most compelling thing they have to offer their clients who are tech people and hate marketing is education. And so we help capture the learning and turn it into content.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, when I saw your website and came across everything, I was super intrigued. I've actually never really seen anything like it. I've heard about ghostwriting and and stuff like that helps people write content or books or but never really kind of focused on actually helping like the newsroom, the team writing, your newsletters, all that stuff. So it was super intriguing. So what makes your team writing process so effective for creating like authentic founder-led content for businesses?
Well, I came up with the team writing process because at the beginning, I had two engagements that were to write two books. I had only 3 months for each book. And I was writing 2 books for SAP on behalf of O'Reilly Associates, the tech publisher. And what I did was I used my, tech background as a CTO of 2 companies, my journalism background as somebody who could interview and do, analysis of what the story should be. And I interviewed a bunch of executives at SAP. At that point, they were trying to promote their flavor of services-oriented architecture. Well, it became quite clear that if I had to do all the writing, there was no way I could have a business. And so I realized that I had to figure out a way to create a division of labor so that I could use my special abilities and, eventually other people who I've trained to do this, our special abilities to understand and create a very high signal interview with somebody, and then somehow be able to present that to a writer who could then, even if they didn't understand the topic the way I did, they could take the transcript and an outline and a brief and then write that up into a pretty good first draft. And so I took, journalistic practice and software development practice and combined them all together because the way things work in the world mostly is like, you have somebody like Malcolm Gladwell, who's a great researcher, a great analyst, and a great writer. And if your content process is bound by only finding people like that, you're not going to be able to create the content you need to at scale. So this division of labor allows you to create a much more scalable content machine.
Okay. Can you share any kind of real world examples of like what you've done to kind of help business and a measurable impact?
Yeah. One of the most fun books we did was for Splunk early on in its career in promoting its search processing language for machine data. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Splunk, but they are a super important company in cybersecurity. But they started out being a company that was a general purpose engine to process machine data, meaning like logs and things coming off of systems, and then extracting signals out of them. And so they were able to do very early on systems that could look at the logs that an application reported maybe an error, and they could combine all the messages into a coherent picture of all the related messages out of huge flow of machine data. They had a bunch of work to do in terms of, first of all, explaining the value of the signals in the machine data. Second of all, explaining their approach to the search processing language. And so what we did is we worked with one of the guys there who was early on named David Carasso, and he had a really hilarious title. He was called Chief Mind of Splunk. And he unfortunately died while snorkeling, very young. But he was a wonderful guy, very zany and fun and super smart. And so he and I and my team, we interviewed, the explanation of the importance of data, of how the search processing language worked, of the important use cases at the time. And then we created a book called, Exploring Splunk that then was super important in their growth stage because they were able to use it for analyst relations, for PR, for partnerships, for recruiting, for product marketing. And it was this foundational story. And so that was one, really important. And they used it for years as they then grew up. And then as Splunk grew up, of course, they became a company that created applications based on these capabilities, for cybersecurity, for applications monitoring, and I think they have a couple of different cybersecurity offerings now. So
It's interesting.
that was one
Now,
example.
yeah, do you now, so I mean, are you able for like maybe like a startup or a company that's not as well established? I mean, would you agree that what your products could do is like kind of like that expert positioning piece where it makes them to the market or to their customers, look more of an expert than they would previously without your product or without your
Well,
help?
the thing is that in the modern world now, we have a tremendous competition for attention at the top of the funnel. And so the way I think of it is it's almost like the written content has become a middle of the funnel asset. On the other hand, when you're going to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars or even over a million, on some system over a short period of time, 1 or 2 years, somebody's going to have to understand it, and somebody's going to have to understand what the implications of and how it works. So eventually you get to that sort of longer form explanations, which are crucial. Now, most people say that by the time you've contacted a company, maybe 60 to 80% of the evaluation is done. So it's really important for you to have accessible content that tells the whole story in a sophisticated way, especially if you're a younger company, because the first market for a younger company is the early adopters. And the early adopters don't want anything about marketing. They just want to know what the thing does. And they're super sophisticated and expert, and they will adapt it to their own needs. And so, it's really important to have that longer form explanation. Now, if you do things the way we do them, which is usually have the company publish the book directly instead of using a publisher, then you can then use all of the great tools that have been developed over the last couple of years to repurpose content and develop derivative content. And, that can support sales enablement, that can support PR, that can support, a variety of different things because AI works best when it goes downhill, from a large corpus of knowledge to a smaller distillation of that. And then, so, having the long form explanation is a really an important thing. So I think that, the challenge though is, when you're a company, developing your product and developing your view on the marketplace, perhaps creating a category, you're going to change, and so luckily you can, your message and you can adapt that and republish that book as your messaging and your product and your point of view matures.
Now, how long is your like life cycle with a client? Do you, typically work with them for a while? Is it kind of like a one-off project, style, or kind of how does that work?
Most of the time we work with a client, we get to know them and get to know their messaging and their product. And it's very typical for us to move from, like, maybe we start with a set of solution briefs that we're doing, and then we move to executive articles, and then maybe we do a book, and then maybe we do another book. For several of our clients, we've done like 6 or 7 books. And some of those books are like self-published stuff. We did a book on cybersecurity for the boardroom recently that worked really well for a client. Other books are, top of the funnel lead generation. We've done more than 8 or 9 dummies books, which are really good top of the funnel assets because everybody knows if you get a dummies book, you're getting a simple, easy to read explanation of something. And it can be something very complicated. We've done dummies books on, data loss protection. We've done them on borderless WAN. We've done them on, for SAP, we've done them on all sorts of things like GRC or SAP NetWeaver. And they tend to be a really nice, many of the books we've had have been the top performing lead generation asset for our clients because, the Dummies brand is just excellent. So it does make sense to use brands, in publishing, when the time is right. Usually that's early. You want to be the first book in your category, not the seventh book.
Yeah, that's a good point. So for you guys, in where you're at, what your growth has been, kind of what are you seeing? What problems or issues are you guys having growing? Is there any kind of like roadblocks to growth, or what are you guys doing to kind of get more clients? Kind of fill me in there.
Well, you've got this whole ecosystem of marketing technology that is got different categories. You've got the sort of traditional marketing systems like HubSpot or Salesforce, and then you've got a whole new layer of companies that are sort of recreating those in different ways. And then you've got a whole layer of what I think most of the time people call it go-to-market software that sits on top of those foundational systems and then supercharges them by adding, the ability to add customized data or, better research prospects or things like that. And so all of that is being used to pump out and fill up our LinkedIn posts and our link in our message boxes. And so my view is that everything that we've learned how to do comes together in what I call, and there's a category out there for this, founder-led marketing. And so our business has been based on, in the past, on providing content to people and then them using it, using the different outbound marketing or PR processes or other, ways of using content. Now, with founder-led marketing, we can work with a founder or a CEO or a senior executive and rapidly kind of evolve their storytelling so that they can not only build a community based on them being an authentic, interesting executive who's not just a marketing cheerleader, but is also telling the story. Like you just asked me, what's my life like? In a founder-led marketing, a program, you would be telling the world what your life is like. Not just, the list of what CEOs usually post, which is we're going to this conference, we hired this person, we have this feature, we just got funded, but actually talking about more what it's like to be, living this life as an exciting startup founder or early stage founder, and then what they're learning about both being that kind of executive, but also what they're learning as a company. And the good and the bad and the ugly about that. Now, what I've realized is that this whole founder-led marketing, domain has a bunch of kind of customs and practices. And one of the practices is that most of the founder-led marketing agencies insist that the executive has to write the content, and be driving the program, and then also be learning how to be a social media sort of thinker. And what I've realized is that the reason they do that is because they don't understand the technology. They don't understand the life of the executive. They don't understand the context for enterprise software. And so, yes, of course they can't ghostwrite because they can't really understand the life that the CEO or founder is leading. We can. And so we offer an ability to have a more intermediated, supported version. And now it means that, instead of having only the people who can succeed as founder-led marketing being those people who, like I mentioned earlier, Malcolm Gladwell, who's naturally a great writer, researcher, and analyst. Well, now we can actually take pretty much any founder of a high-tech company and help them tell their story, still in an authentic way, but using our help. And so it opens the practice of founder-led marketing up to a much more wider, group. And then also, given the fact that we have written more than 34 books, and so we have deep domain expertise in cybersecurity, deep domain expertise in databases and data analytics, and a variety of different other software areas. We've done a bunch of work in transportation, in construction, in manufacturing. So we're able to use our team writing process to channel a founder-led marketing program. And then the other thing that's not really well understood and acknowledged is that founder-led marketing can serve a bunch of internal communication practices. It's pretty well understood that being publishing on LinkedIn is a great way to communicate with your company because people pay attention to what you say in public. But it's also a great it's a of handling sales enablement challenges. It's also a great way of dealing with objections and other communication needs that you have with respect to messaging or a variety of other communication processes that the CEO can actually support. And instead of somebody sending somebody a objection handling article or whatever you have, you can send them to a post, where the CEO handles the objection. Yeah, we're on top of this. And this is how intimate and on top of it we are. So I think that it's possible to handle, a lot of product marketing, corporate communications, PR, and sales enablement challenges using founder-led marketing.
Yeah, I mean, is now with the introduction to AI, all that, stuff that's coming up, machine learning, AI, has that impacted kind of how you guys run your business or ideate or do anything like that? Or do you see any kind of change that's going to impact you?
Yeah, I think that it's like I said before, the idea is that if you create a corpus of content about something, about a company or whatever, AI helps you go sort of downhill from that into distilled forms. So, as we get to know a company and we do interviews with more and more executives, that first of all, those transcripts become, a way of doing that. But you can also then improve the messaging documents that they have, because one of my big areas that I think is really important for tech companies is what I call message enablement. And often when tech companies create messaging, they create it and it's in a distilled form, but they don't spend a lot of time explaining all the context necessary to teach that messaging to the rest of the company who is maybe not as sophisticated about the history of the category and, not as sophisticated about the workings of the technology. And so in order to really do a good job of having everybody own and master the messaging, you have to provide all of that stuff. And so as time goes on, you can distill from all the interviews you're doing with the execs and all the work you're doing on the content, a much better messaging document that then serves to the purpose of messaging enablement. And then the same is true of sales enablement. If you stay in touch with the sales staff, they will tell you what they need, and then being able to kind of respond to that quickly is important. Like one of the ideas I think that it's really important for tech companies to do is what I call the continuous sales kickoff. You do all this work to train everybody on the messaging at the beginning of the year. It's all super cool. But then during the year, you're learning. And so you should be keeping up that training material. You should be adding new sales enablement, content. And all of that should be going on constantly. And you should be keeping people in touch with how is the messaging involved? What sales enablement challenges have we met and addressed? What new objections are we finding? What competitive differentiation needs to be communicated, and you have to staff and do the reporting and then the content creation to keep it going.
Oh, interesting. That's great insight. I mean, I bet you there's a lot of companies that don't really. They always send the benchmarks and do all the work up front at the beginning of the year, and then they fail to really kind of go back and kind of look at those, messaging and all the benchmarks that they set at the beginning of the year. That's something that I kind of focus on my own business, is going back and checking, every quarter on where we're at and kind of redoing all that messaging and the communications so that everyone's on the same page. So yeah, I think that's great insight. Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where are you on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and kind of,
Yeah, I'm Dan Woods Early on LinkedIn. You can find me on Evolved Media, EVOLVED Media. .com. Evolvedmedia.com is my main site. And then, I do some analysis work at earlyadopter.com as well. But, we're happy to talk with people and brainstorm all the time. That's usually the way we end up starting engagements, is by either sending or brainstorming with people and they like the ideas they see. I wrote for 10 years for Forbes, and there's a lot of articles I wrote during that period that you can find online as well. You can see the link from my LinkedIn profile. And also we've created, either for our clients or under my name, 34 books. And if you go to evolvemedia.com, you can see all those books at the books link.
I'll put all those links and everything in the captions. And thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure.
Alex, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it too.
Thank you. Bye bye.